Welcome back, Focus Learners. Get ready because today's explainer is an absolutely high-energy deep dive into the architecture of modern rebellion. We're looking specifically at the track Freedom Fighter by Tomcats World. We're going to break down its lyrical themes, map out this incredible narrative of defiance, and examine the stark contrast the songwriter paints to construct this whole story. Okay, let's dive right into this. Right out of the gate, the track hits us with this line, "Oh, all it takes is one to get the job done." Now, this isn't just a catchy opening, right? It is literally the foundational premise of the entire song. It immediately establishes a narrative of profound individual agency. In a world that might seem overwhelmingly complex or monolithic, the songwriter centers the power squarely on the shoulders of the individual. And that leads us to the central question driving this explainer. What happens when one person decides they have just had enough? In literary terms, we're basically tracking a classic hero's journey here. Every hero starts in an ordinary, often deeply flawed world, and some kind of catalyst forces them to step out of it. So we are going to follow this track's protagonist as they observe their surroundings, reject the baseline reality, and ultimately decide to cross the threshold into active resistance. Section 1, the modern protest anthem and deciphering those lyrics. Let's get into it. To really fully grasp Freedom Fighter by Tomcats World, we have to understand that the track is highly, highly concise. There isn't a single wasted word here. Honestly, it's a lot like lyrical espresso, just super concentrated. And because of that brevity, we're kind of required to play detective with the specific vocabulary and imagery chosen by the artist. Every single phrase carries weight, serving to either define the problem or present the solution. Our analysis today rests on three core pillars. First up, individualism versus conformity. That's the primary friction of the song. Second, active resistance, which is the method of dealing with that friction. And third, reclaiming power, the ultimate goal. We're going to track exactly how the protagonist moves from merely observing a totally broken society to taking radical, kinetic action. Section 2, defining the status quo, or as the song calls it, the complacent wall. Tired of the lies, living on the run. Now, this right here is the initial catalyst for our protagonist's journey. You see, before there's a fighter, there is simply a person experiencing profound exhaustion. The ordinary world they inhabit is characterized by evasion and deceit. It's an incredibly draining environment, and this pure fatigue is really what pushes the narrator to the breaking point. The lyrics describe a complacent wall made of nothing but NPCs. Now, NPC, or non-player character, is a term lifted straight from video games and internet vernacular. Objectively speaking, as a rhetorical device, it's used here to vividly illustrate individuals who are perceived as strictly conforming to the status quo. By using this specific term, the songwriter effectively creates a really sharp in-group versus out-group dynamic. It separates the active thinking protagonist from a society that they view as basically operating on autopilot. The lyrics then expand on this societal baseline with the phrase, "too scared to step up, living on their knees." This completes the picture of the antagonist in our story. And notice the antagonist isn't necessarily a specific villain, like a politician or an organization. No, the antagonist is the pervasive culture of fear and inaction itself. It's the tragedy of a population completely paralyzed by their own apprehension. So, what does it take to break out of this complacency? If the gravity of the status quo is really that heavy, what kind of force is required to achieve escape velocity? Let's meet the song's protagonist and observe their highly contrasting worldview. Section 3, Anatomy of a Fighter. Breaking the walls. The narrator draws a definitive line in the sand with 6 simple words, "But I'm not built like that." There is just absolute defiance in this short phrase. The narrator is claiming an inherent, unyielding difference from the NPCs surrounding them. It is a bold statement of identity. They are fundamentally constructed differently, completely incapable of participating in that culture of fear. And this song quickly moves from identity to action, shattering every obstacle, reclaiming time, kicking down the lock on every door. This is a brilliant micro-narrative of violence and energy. The protagonist's resistance is not passive at all. It's definitely not a quiet disagreement. It is highly kinetic, physical, and absolutely unstoppable. They aren't just opening doors, you guys. They are literally kicking down the locks. The structural genius of the lyrics really lies in their contrasts. On one side, we have the complacent, living on their knees, scared, bowing to commands, all language of submission and stillness. And opposed to that, we have the fighter, shattering, taking back, screaming, and shouting. That's all language of explosive action and dominance. This stark dichotomy perfectly captures the absolute core tension of the entire track. And this brings us to one of the most powerful moments in the lyric, "Remember when they tried to shut my voice out? I just turn it up, let it scream and shout." This is incredible. The protagonist doesn't just resist suppression, they use it as fuel. The very act of someone trying to silence them is the exact mechanism that triggers them to amplify their own message. It's like a self-sustaining engine of rebellion.
Section 4, the call to action, rise up.
We hit the emotional peak of the track with this repetition. Rise up, don't surrender now. Up until this point, the song has been heavily focused on I, what I am doing, how I am different. But here, the lens widens. The lone fighter turns to face the listener, issuing a direct command. It transforms the whole song from a personal diary entry into a public manifesto. So the crucial point here is that the artist doesn't just say rise up and leave it vague. No, they provide a clear instructional blueprint laid out right there in the lyrics. It starts by stopping the act of bowing to commands, then refusing to give in to their demands, culminating in finally taking back the town. It's a highly structured procedure for active communal resistance, moving so smoothly from mental refusal to physical reclamation. And that reclamation requires a complete paradigm shift, which is captured flawlessly in this quote. "I'm not asking for permission anymore." This is the ultimate declaration of autonomy. You just cannot fight a system while still playing by its rules and waiting for its approval. This line marks the complete severing of ties with the established rules of the NPC world. Section 5, the final message. Holding tight. The lyrics give us this really grounded reality check. Breaking through the darkness every single night. I really want you to focus on the phrase, every single night. This isn't a glorious one-time cinematic battle that ends in a parade. The artist is communicating that this rebellion is a continuous, grueling, daily battle. Freedom, in the context of this song, requires exhausting, relentless maintenance. But why do it, right? Why endure the darkness every night? Well, they're fighting for their people. This is fascinating because despite the intense, almost isolated individualism we saw earlier in the song, the whole "I'm not built like that, I don't need them" vibe, the ultimate goal of the protagonist isn't selfish at all. The lone wolf's final objective is entirely about communal salvation. They're fighting to wake up the very people they criticized earlier. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. In a society divided between the quiet comfort of compliance and the grueling everyday fight for autonomy, what side of the wall will ultimately determine the future of the town? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, Focus Learners. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.